Now that you've finished the Unit 1 material, I would like you to start on the Unit 2 material. Now we're starting off with the reproduction section. So I'd like you to watch this video, and then after that I want you to start filling in the notes. That's great, thanks. This topic is reproduction, fertility and contraception. So we're going to learn about our bits. We're going to learn a bit then about how they work. We're going to learn also about where babies come from, and also a bit then about how we can stop pregnancies taking place. So that's reproduction, fertility and contraception. Now the first thing we need to consider is the differences between boys and men. So we know of course that changes take place during puberty. Now boys will hit puberty maybe say from about 12 to 14 years of age, and during that time of course that's when they start puberty, and that'll go on until maybe 20, 21 years of age, and that's kind of when they'll stop puberty, and of course they'll be men at that stage then. Now we need to think about some of the changes which take place then during puberty. Now if we think about boys and the changes which take place with boys, well what we have here is we have some of the main changes. Now some of which then are fairly easy to see. We've got, for example, facial hair, which will develop then through puberty then. Shoulders will widen as well. One of the things then is that males, when they hit puberty, will start to produce a hormone in their testes then called testosterone. And that testosterone then causes an increase in muscle mass. Now, you've all heard about anabolic steroids. Anabolic steroids are very, very similar in chemical structure to testosterone. They both increase muscle mass. So one of the big changes that is visible in the boys then is that their shoulders will widen because they've got more muscle mass, and generally speaking they'll have more muscle throughout then. Other changes which take place, of course, hair under the arms as well, pubic hair as well, of course, then this increase in strength we've already mentioned then because of testosterone. Also, of course, we also then have penis gets larger. Also the testes will also descend from the main trunk of the body, and importantly of course they'll also start to produce sperm cells. Now unfortunately as well what happens is that they also tend to have more spots, and again it's one of the worst things about puberty is having these spots, and because your skin produces more oil, the oil traps in the bacteria, and bacteria of course then causes spots then. So boys changes are a bit like that. Then of course then we've got then the girls changes. Girls of course then have to start to produce eggs, and also need to get ready just in case they become pregnant then. So again we've got lots of different changes to do with that. Now one of course obvious change is the breasts start to develop. Also you're going to find as well the hips will widen then. Now really hips widen because the uterus, which of course then is around with this area here, this uterus then is going into to need to be ready just in case then pregnancy develops. So therefore hips would need to widen to allow that to happen then. Other changes would take place of course, well we've got pubic hair of course happening again here. We've got again an increase in muscle mass, not as noticeable as the boys, but we have this increase in muscle mass. Hair under the arms. We've got then again skin getting oilier here as well. The breast developing as well. The breast develop just in case again the girl becomes pregnant, and therefore she needs to produce milk then, and of course the milk come from the breast then in terms of breastfeeding. So again these are all changes which take place. Also periods will start. The fancy name for periods is menstruation will start, and she will start then to also to release egg cells from the ovaries. So these are all changes which take place. Girls have puberty before boys, normally a few years earlier than boys, and again they will be constantly producing egg cells once a month then until they hit menopause, which is maybe around about the mid-50s when they stop producing egg cells. So that's girls then. Now then if we kind of think a bit more then about what causes these changes, you're going to find in girls we've got estrogen. Estrogen then is produced by the ovaries and causes a lot of these changes to take place. There is also another hormone involved called progesterone, which is more to do with the menstrual cycle, which I'll come back to later on. We know, of course, we mentioned that the boys produce sperm cells and the girls produce egg cells. If we show a little picture of what they look like, here we have a sperm cell and here we have an egg cell. Now, our egg cell is much bigger. In fact, you can't see it in this diagram here, but the egg cell is much bigger than the sperm cell. Looking at these diagrams, you're talking about then maybe about 50 times bigger than that little sperm cell. So again, that's our egg cell here. We say once a month, then a woman releases an egg cell from her ovaries, which will then pass down the fallopian tube and may then be fertilized, of course, then by a sperm cell. A few things about these egg cells. One, that they have a large food store. So there's a large food store in here. It's all food in here. Now again, they need to have a food store because at the very early stages, if she does become pregnant, the fertilized egg cell has then to allow the baby to develop. And that early stages needs a lot of food, which comes from the food store inside the egg cell. In terms of the sperm cells then they have this, of course, big long tail. Now that means, of course, they can swim into the egg cell. Also in here they've got then what's called the neck, this part here. This neck here contains lots of mitochondria. If you remember back from the beginning of last year, mitochondria are the parts of the cell which break down food to release energy. So again, there's lots of mitochondria which helps the sperm cell to swim. Also, you just kind of have this shape here. At the top here, in fact, you've got enzymes, and these enzymes here, they help then to actually break through the wall of the egg cell. Now, that's what these gametes will look like. Another thing, of course, which are unusual about these gametes is that they only contain half of the DNA. So we know that a normal cell contains 46 chromosomes, whereas these cells here only contain then 23 chromosomes. These are what we call haploid cells. So normal cell is a diploid cell. These cells are called haploid cells. And obviously when the sperm cell, which contains half of the DNA, and the egg cell, which contains half the DNA, when their nuclei fuse together and a new baby starts to grow, then of course it now then has its full amount of DNA again here. So again, gametes, of course, are very important. We say that when they come together, well, here they are coming together here. We've mentioned the words haploid cells. We've mentioned the haploid cell, sperm cell, haploid egg cell. They, of course, come together to form this diploid cell. Now that diploid cell, in fact, is called a zygote. Okay. Now that zygote then is going to start to divide as it rolls down the fallopian tube. What happens then is when it's mature and when it starts to keep on rolling down, it's going to end up implanting itself in the wall of the uterus. Now, let's think about then how these testes or how these sperm cells are produced, and also then how the sperm cells make it into the lady. Then let's look at the male parts. Here we have a diagram here of the male parts. Now, obviously some parts hang outside the body, some parts are inside the body. It's quite hard sometimes we look at this diagram here to see what it looks like. Now, first of all, we can say is the sperm cells themselves, they're produced inside the testes. Now, the sperm cells might take about 7 weeks to form. It starts off as a normal cell. It's produced by meiosis. It starts off as this normal cell, and that normal cell then will grow a tail. And what happens is that will then be ready then to be released then. The testes then, they sit outside the main part of the body in a sac then, which is called the scrotum. Now that scrotum, temperature inside the scrotum is slightly lower than the rest of the body then, because the testes tend to produce sperm cells at a faster rate than in this slightly cooler temperature. Those sperm cells are made. Now they're constantly being made really from beginning of puberty until the man dies. In fact, then these sperm cells are being produced then. Millions of these sperm cells. Sperm cells then are stored in this area down here called epididymis, a word you're not going to see in a GCSE textbook. But again, they're stored in here, and what happens in fact then is that when they're going to pass out, now they will in fact then pass out then through this tube here. This tube is the sperm tube, we've called it here, also called the sperm duct, also called the vas deferens. we'll call it simply sperm tube. It's going to pass out through here. It's going to pass in behind the bladder. Okay, behind the bladder, in fact, you're going to find we have other organs involved in what we have here called seminal vesicles. These are organs which again supply fluid into and mix up with the actual sperm cells. Prostate gland, again, prostate gland, they also produce secretions which helps then to nourish the sperm and helps the sperm cells to swim. What happens then, it's going to pass, sperm cells then outside pass down the sperm duct, behind the bladder here, down then the center of the penis, which is the urethra, it's called. It's going to pass it out through here then. Okay, so that's the kind of passage of the sperm cells. Now what comes out is called an ejaculation, and that contains the fluid which is called semen, and semen then really is the sperm cells plus secretions or fluid from the seminal vesicles and also the prostate gland. The other part we have here, mentioned penis, of course. Penis can fill with blood when a man is aroused. The penis will fill with blood and will stand upright, and therefore, of course, it's easier for it to be inserted inside the vagina. So that's the male parts. So here we have the female parts. Now again, most of these are inside the lady's body. If we think first of all with the ovaries, well, ovaries then are the parts which are producing, of course, the egg cells. Now the egg cells will be produced, they'll pass into these tubes here. These tubes are called the fallopian tubes. Okay, now some books will call them the oviduct, and the egg cell will slowly make its way then down this oviduct here into then the main part here, which is uterus. Uterus now is where the actual baby will develop later on, and so again it passes then down through here. As it goes through the uterus, if it doesn't get fertilized, then what happens in fact then is going to pass then from here, it's going to pass it out then through the vagina. So that's what happens with the female parts. Now again, we're going to learn later on about how the uterus wall changes at different stages of the menstrual cycle, but for now we'll just mention the vagina. We've mentioned in this part here, really the narrowing part of the uterus is called the cervix. The uterus itself, old books will call it the womb. The fallopian tubes also called oviduct, and then we've got the ovaries here. Again, these are all parts which we'll learn about in more detail later on as well. So if we think about then pregnancy, we say that if the actual egg cell is fertilized by the sperm cell, then we'll have pregnancy taking place. Now, pregnancy in fact happens after the fertilized egg cell implants into the wall of the uterus. Now, when that happens, different structures begin to grow. Now, one of those structures then is the placenta. The placenta is an important part. Placenta then is the interface really between the mother's blood and the baby. So the placenta grows into the wall of uterus, and again it's got a very large surface area, and it's very tightly bound with the wall of the uterus. It has a very large surface area. It's got thin walls, just so we can get as much oxygen, for example, from the mother's blood into then the umbilical cord. So if we think about then the oxygen, things like glucose, they pass via the placenta, then they pass through the umbilical cord. It's going to pass into the baby. It's going to pass, of course, into the belly button of the baby, and then it'll be used then for growth. Things which the baby doesn't want, so for example, carbon dioxide, and also things like urea. Well, those things the baby doesn't want, the carbon dioxide certainly is going to pass then out via the umbilical cord and into the mother's blood, and of course she'll breathe it out eventually then. As well as the placenta and umbilical cord, we've also then got this bag which starts to surround the baby then. That bag is called the amnion, or else also called the amniotic sac. And inside the amniotic sac you have fluid, and that fluid is called amniotic fluid. It helps to protect the baby from infection and also just the odd bump here and there. Now it's very important, this amniotic sac is so much so, in fact, then if it does burst early, maybe in the later stages of pregnancy, if it does burst early, then we know more likely infection might take place. So from that stage on, the mother, in fact, might need to spend the rest of her time in the hospital until the baby's born then. Now, we don't do much about birth in terms of GCSE specification anymore. We know, of course, then that the uterus wall, it will contract. The cervix, of course, will dilate. And what happens is the baby will get passed then out through the vagina then. Now, a very painful process, of course. And what happens then is that when it is born, the umbilical cord is still attached to the placenta. Not long after the baby's born, then the actual placenta and the umbilical cord get passed out, and that's the afterbirth. But again, that's what happens then during birth then. If we just go in a bit more detail about the placenta and the umbilical cord here. Now, first thing maybe I should mention again is this term here, fetus. Now, although I said in the past about babies, really the baby, it's not called baby until the actual thing is delivered. What happens, in fact, we've mentioned the zygote first of all, and it forms a small ball of cells. Then what happens is that's going to implant into the wall of uterus. An embryo is what we call at that stage. As it gets older and we start to see things like hands and feet, and starts to develop more like a little person, it's called a fetus. It'll develop as a fetus, and then when it's born, in fact, it becomes then a baby. So fetus is really the proper name for most of its time inside its mother. We also mentioned as well, here's the uterus wall here. Here's the placenta here. You can see that we've got this connection in between the two here then, and really the placenta kind of grows into the uterus, so we can get as much stuff as possible in exchange between the mother and the baby then. So things such as glucose and oxygen will go towards the baby, go towards the fetus, excuse me, and things like carbon dioxide and excess salts will go in the opposite direction then. So that's the placenta and the umbilical cord. Now, we know, of course, that normally the lady doesn't become pregnant. Okay, yes, there are times when she does, but normally, of course, she doesn't become pregnant then. And what happens is her body needs to be ready just in case she does become pregnant. So it has to go through this cycle, this menstrual cycle. It's called menstrual cycle because menses is the word for moon, and it takes 28 days for the moon to revolve around the earth, and this cycle takes about 28 days as well then. So we're saying really about the first few days of the cycle, we've got then menstruation taking place. So people look here, this entire circle here is 28 days. So the first few days then, you've got, as I say, menstruation taking place. Now that might be, it could be 3 days, could be 5 days, could be slightly different. But again, we're talking about then the first few days of the menstrual cycle, and that's when the uterus wall breaks down and kind of everything gets reset again then. After menstruation then, of course, the actual uterus lining needs to build up again. So you can see it here, it starts to build up. That's basically more tissue being laid down, more blood vessels being laid down, making this uterus lining thicker. And again, we have here, we've got it becoming thicker and thicker and thicker here. Then what happens is some stage then we have ovulation taking place. Normally about day 14 then is when ovulation takes place. Could be a day or two after, or a day or two before, but normally on average it's about day 14 then. Now, then we have the actual uterus wall remains thick, even thickens maybe slightly more, thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. If she becomes pregnant, then of course she will not have menstruation, and the uterus wall will continue to thicken, and the fetus will develop. But of course, if it doesn't become pregnant, then of course the cycle starts again, and we have menstruation taking place again here then. So it is this constant cycle, kind of basically getting the woman ready for pregnancy, then resetting again, getting ready for pregnancy, then resetting again, and that's the menstrual cycle. That goes on from the beginning of puberty up until menopause kicks in later on in life then. We've mentioned the menstrual cycle then. Now, of course, then sometimes the person might not be able to become pregnant. She might become infertile. And this picture here is of a lady, and she's holding then pregnancy to stick, I suppose you could call it, where she'd urinate in that, and it would tell her if she's pregnant or not then. Of course, some women can't get pregnant, and that could be the fault of the lady, or else it could be the fault of the man. And again, there's different reasons why that might be the case then. It might be that her egg cells are not being produced, the ovary simply hasn't produced any egg cells. It might be that the oviduct, the fallopian tubes, they become blocked and the sperm cells can't reach the egg cells. That might be an issue here as well. It might be that there's sexually transmitted infections. She might have something like chlamydia, which is causing an issue here, which is a problem. It might also be the uterus does not allow implantation. Sometimes the actual uterus can be an issue. It might be very acidic and therefore kill the sperm cells when they get passed into the uterus. It might be that the actual uterus wall will not allow implantation as well. And so again, there are issues which can go wrong with the female's body then. Now, other things which can happen as well, of course, we've got this idea of the acidic vagina that kills the cells then. But it's not always the lady's fault. Of course, it could be the man's fault as well. You might find that the man does not produce enough sperm cells, doesn't produce, maybe the sperm cells he does produce don't swim very well. Can be another issue here as well. And okay, also of course you might find that he can't have an erection. Maybe he's impotent. So these are all different issues which might cause infertility. Again, it's a very painful time if a couple are trying to conceive. It's an issue here then. If that is the case, then of course there are issues, there are problems which hopefully we could solve then. We have of course IVF. Now IVF stands for in vitro fertilization, literally meaning in glass fertilization. So let's kind of have a look at how it works. First thing which happens here then is we find then that we might need then to give some hormones to cause the actual then ovaries to produce the egg cells. It might be a matter then of the fact then that the lady can't produce egg cells, so therefore she might have injections which helps her to produce egg cells. Sometimes that's all which was required then. However, what will normally happen though is that once she has produced these egg cells, they then collect the egg cells. They collect the egg cells from the lady, and what they'll also do is they'll collect the sperm cells from the man then. So they have then some of her egg cells and have some of her sperm cells. And what they'll do then is they'll get the sperm cells and they inject the sperm cells into the egg cells. That's kind of what's happening in this little picture here then. That's a wee sperm cell being injected into the egg cell. Now then what happens then is we have the doctors, and what they will do in fact then is they will then monitor the egg cells and see which egg cells have been fertilized by which sperm cells. They'll monitor those, they'll see which ones are growing well, and then what they'll do then is that they'll put the ones which are growing well back inside the lady again then. Now there may in fact be ones which are left over. They might be burnt, or else they might be used in fact for stem cell research, which is a whole different area of the course. But those then cells, they're developing here, okay, and what they'll do then is they will then place the best ones then into the lady again then, okay. She might need a few more hormones there as well to make sure that the uterus is ready for implantation then. So there's some of them for use for that, and then the ones which you say aren't used might then be frozen for a later stage in case they want to try it again, or else they might be simply used for IVF treatment, or sorry, for stem cell research. Now, the process is quite a expensive process. Okay, normally in the NHS you might get a chance for maybe one, maybe even possibly two chances before you need to start to pay for it then. But again, it can work. It might not work, of course, but it can work in, and it can be a lifeline for people who want to have kids in. And of course, they might then take a test a few days after that then and see if she's become pregnant then. As IVF in. Other options, of course, include adoption. Okay, even surrogacy, where the sperm cells and egg cells are placed into somebody else, and what happens is that other person then carries the baby and then gives the baby then to the couple then. So these are all different issues then. Now, some people have great difficulty having children. For some people, they'll have sex once and the woman becomes pregnant the very, very first time. So again, there are people who might not want to have children then, and that's where contraception comes in then. Now, maybe if a couple don't want the sperm cells and egg cells to meet, they don't want to have kids, but they do want to have sex, that's where, where contraception comes in then. Again, there's three main kinds. The first kind is mechanical contraception, where we have some kind of barrier between then the sperm cells and the egg cells. The second kind then we have is chemical contraception, where some kind of chemicals or hormones are used to maybe to stop the egg cells being released. And the third kind we have then is surgical. The surgical is more extreme. Some people might decide maybe if they've already had a few kids, they don't want to have any more kids. It's a permanent procedure, and therefore they might then have surgery then to stop any more babies being produced. Then these are the three main kinds: mechanical, chemical, and surgical. Look at each of these. Now again, what we have in fact is we have on this page here is we have different kinds of birth control and also then how successful they are. So we have ones at the bottom here first of all. Now these are classified in this little diagram here as not so well. So these are ones which maybe don't work that well. Withdrawal method, okay, basically when the man's about to ejaculate, he stops and pulls out. Again, very, very unsuccessful with this withdrawal method. Another method as well is we have what they've classified here as fertility awareness. Basically, the rhythm technique where the couple don't have sex when they think the egg cell is in the fallopian tube. So really round about then a few days before and a few days after they reckon ovulation takes place, they might then avoid having sex at those times. Again, not a very successful technique. There's different reasons why that might not work. It might be the lady's not regular, maybe she's been put under stress, and therefore then it might not work as it should then. Other techniques we have here too. Condom is a barrier technique, of course, can be quite useful. It's quite a popular technique for some people then, is a condom. Diaphragm is kind of a similar thing. This is placed inside the lady over her cervix, and the sperm cells get caught in here then. Now, just how reliable are these things? We said the worst ones are probably withdrawal, and also then we have this idea of fertility awareness. Again, condoms here and diaphragm, again, it's not that successful. Okay, again, if we think here, we have if a couple are having sex regularly then throughout the year, what happens then is that they're using a condom, for example here, still of 100 women, about then 12 to 24 of them will become pregnant then. So again, there's still certainly a good chance that the lady might become pregnant then using those techniques then. Then if we come into more efficient methods here, we've got the pill. This would be a chemical method here. The pill contains progesterone, contains estrogen. What happens is the lady takes it then every day, and the hormones mean that her ovaries will not produce egg cells. Again, issues with this one though is that they need to make sure that they take it every single day. If they forget to take it, then of course they're not then protected from pregnancy then. Patch is something similar where maybe rather than having to take a pill every day, this might stay in their bodies maybe for a month. They might kind of put this on, it's like a plaster almost, and the patch then will be constantly releasing these hormones. The ring goes inside the vagina as well. It's constantly releasing then the hormones, and of course they might then have an injection of this as well. And so again, these are different ways in which we can get progesterone and estrogen into the person then. Again, it's more reliable. Still, if a couple then are having sex regularly over that year, there's still maybe a 6 to 10% chance that the girl might become pregnant still. And then we have then the most efficient ones at the top here, which would be then more to do with maybe where doctors might be required at this stage here. First one then is an implant. The person might need an implant, possibly into their arm. They have this implant then, and what happens is that implant is constantly releasing then the hormones. It's a little bit like the patch, whereas the patch might last for maybe a month. Implant maybe lasts for even maybe three years then. So again, then we have this implant. As we have here, we've got IUDs. IUDs are what we call intrauterine devices. We've got different ones here. Some will last for longer than others. And this is basically being placed inside the lady then by a doctor. Really what it does is it kind of irritates the wall uterus, and therefore prevents implantation from taking place. So the little egg cell can't stick to the wall uterus. And that's where these IUDs come in then. Now then, the most successful technique then is sterilization. Now this is when either the sperm tube, the sperm duct, is cut and tied in the males. In females then it might be the fallopian tube gets cut and tied. And it's really so is that either the sperm cells can't get out, or else the egg cells and the sperm cells cannot meet then. It is a surgical technique. Now, it is very successful. Still, though, there's still a 1 in 100 chance, or maybe slightly less, but there still is a chance that the person can become pregnant. Even sometimes, the actual tubes can kind of regrow again here then. So again, it's not 100% accurate then. But again, certainly it's a lot more successful than the other techniques then. Some people might decide, though, that they want a vasectomy, that's their sperm tubes cut and tied. Then maybe later on in life, they might think, well, I've maybe met somebody else, I want to have kids again. Quite often, it's very, very difficult to reverse that technique then. So again, really, it's a permanent procedure, this sterilization then. So these are different methods of contraception. None of them are 100% effective. Really, the only way of not getting pregnant is not having sex. So that is reproduction, fertility, and contraception. Hopefully you've learned a bit more about how it works. Now, in terms of GCSEs, you'll be asked questions upon how the parts work. You'll be asked questions about pregnancy. You'll be asked questions about the menstrual cycle. You'll be asked questions about IVF, and also asked questions about contraception. It's not a particularly big unit, and again, hopefully it's one which is not that difficult to learn as well. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.